$60 million. That is how much money was spent trying to stop one man from winning a single primary election in Michigan last week. He wasn't a senator, nor was he a governor. As a matter of fact, he had never won an election in his life. 8 years earlier, he had run for governor and lost by more than 20 points. This time, he started with 4 staffers, almost no money, and crowds so small that sometimes more people were on stage than in the room. But that didn't stop them, because the more money his opponent spent trying to stop him, the more his campaign seemed to grow. By election night, tens of millions of dollars had been spent against him, and it still wasn't enough. On August 4th, 2026, Abdul El-Sayed won the Democratic Senate primary by just 14,893 votes out of more than 1.5 million. The strangest part of this story, though, is that 9 months earlier, almost the exact same thing had happened in New York City, and we all know how that turned out. So the question is, why are establishment Democrats spending tens of millions of dollars trying to stop candidates like these? And what does it tell us about what is happening inside the Democratic Party? On August 4th, 2026, as midnight passed in Michigan, the ballots piled up, but the screens remained blank. No network would project a winner. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and Congresswoman Haley Stevens were locked in a dead heat. Only early the next morning, on August 5th, did the Associated Press finally call the race. The margin was historically tight. Just 14,893 votes separated them out of more than 1.5 million votes cast. A gap of under 1%, driven by the highest reported Democratic primary turnout in recent state history. Within hours, El-Sayed stood before a packed crowd at Detroit's Majestic Theater before moving to the iconic Spirit of Detroit statue. He told his supporters, "We took on a machine," before invoking Muhammad Ali's famous declaration, "We shook up the world." But how can an outcome this razor-thin carry consequences this massive? Abdul El-Sayed was born in the Detroit suburbs in 1984 to Egyptian immigrant parents. He graduated from the University of Michigan, earned a public health doctorate at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, and received his medical degree from Columbia University. In 2015, at 30 years old, he was appointed executive director of the Detroit Health Department. Campaign literature describes him as the youngest health officer of a major American city, a distinction still pending formal verification. He rebuilt the department following Detroit's municipal bankruptcy. Under his tenure, the city implemented school-led water testing after the Flint water crisis, provided free glasses to school children, and monitored local refinery emissions. From 2023 through 2025, El-Sayed expanded this work as director of Wayne County's health department. But can a local public health record translate into statewide political credibility? In 2018, Gretchen Whitmer defeated El-Sayed in the Democratic gubernatorial primary by over 20 percentage points. He stepped away from campaigns. For years, he hosted the America Dissected podcast, wrote Healing Politics and Medicare for All, a citizen's guide, and built a large digital following. Yet, online views do not automatically translate into votes or a field operation. The test came in April 2025, when Senator Gary Peters announced his retirement. El-Sayed entered the race with just 4 staffers. They converted digital attention into physical organization, coordinating over 500 events across 110 cities, powered by 12,000 volunteers. Could the audience built after a blunt defeat become a statewide electorate? Federal Election Commission filings reveal an unprecedented financial assault. Outside groups spent over $60 million supporting Haley Stevens or opposing El-Sayed. This included over $30 million from the United Democracy Project, an AIPAC-affiliated super PAC operating independently of the Stevens campaign. The Democratic establishment aligned behind Stevens, with endorsements from Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Senator Gary Peters, and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer. In response, El-Sayed's campaign declared a movement of the many against the money, rejecting PAC funds for individual donors. When late, negative attack ads failed to break El-Sayed's grassroots volunteer network, the spending limit was reached. If the financial ledger is accurate, what did this historic institutional support fail to buy? In June 2025, Zohran Mamdani, a 34-year-old Queens State Assemblyman and Democratic Socialist, won New York City's Democratic mayoral primary over the party establishment. Unlike Michigan's system, Mamdani won through ranked choice voting. He went on to defeat Andrew Cuomo in the November general election, and on January 1, 2026, took the oath of office in a decommissioned subway station beneath City Hall. Campaigners described him as New York's first Muslim mayor and the first from Queens, claims still pending verification. Mamdani's campaign relied on podcasts, streamers, and direct digital outreach to younger voters, bypassing traditional media. He faced $15 million in establishment-backed outside spending, countered by $7 million from progressive groups. By April 2026, a Marist poll recorded his approval at 48% against 30% disapproval, following a rent freeze on stabilized units and a passed city budget. Does New York establish a precedent, or only a parallel? Both operations bypassed traditional party gatekeepers, running directly against their own leadership rather than alongside it. They swapped million-dollar television ad buys for micro-targeted streams, podcasts, and digital creators to capture younger voters who typically ignore standard campaigns. Each ran on a shared economic frame: healthcare, the soaring cost of living, and a fierce opposition to corporate campaign cash. Surviving massive outside spending suggested their strategies were durable, not merely lucky. But are these digital mechanics a repeatable blueprint for modern elections, or did two exceptional campaigns simply find a way to break the system? El-Sayed's victory margin of under 1% represents a narrow mandate. Nearly half of Democratic primary voters chose Haley Stevens, showing that a self-selecting primary electorate rarely represents the general public. Polling diverges over methodology and sponsors. A Glengarriff Group survey placed Republican Mike Rogers 10 points ahead, while a progressive-backed Data for Progress poll showed El-Sayed narrowly leading. Meanwhile, Bridge, Michigan fact-checked El-Sayed's claim of erasing $700 million in medical debt, finding the county actually settled $57.4 million for 83,291 residents. The campaign responds that the program remains active. Critics argue a moderate is safer in a swing state. Can a coalition designed for a primary persuade voters who were never in it? On November 3, 2026, El-Sayed faces Republican Mike Rogers, who lost the 2024 Senate race by just 0.34%. Michigan has not elected a Republican senator since 1994, yet Cook Political Report rates this race a toss-up. Republican groups have reserved $45 million in general election advertising, and AIPAC has pledged active opposition. El-Sayed has characterized Israel's actions in Gaza as genocide, calling for an end to U.S. military aid. This stance faced intense scrutiny in March 2026 after an attack on Temple Israel in West Bloomfield. El-Sayed condemned the assault but linked the attacker's actions to Israeli strikes in Lebanon that reportedly killed his relatives. Synagogue leadership and Jewish organizations criticized the response as equivocal, though El-Sayed stood by his statement to represent Michigan's Arab American and Muslim communities. Chuck Schumer issued a post-primary endorsement to signal party unity, but the pressure remains. Will these forces broaden the coalition or define its vulnerabilities first? The November general election presents an unresolved strategic choice for the Democratic Party. Establishment strategists argue that swing state safety requires moderate candidates with broad, centrist appeal. Progressives counter that El-Sayed's model of mobilizing disengaged voters through candidate-controlled digital communication can succeed in swing states rather than only deep blue cities. Moderates maintain that this race proved only his primary electability. While saturated campaigns show diminishing returns on massive advertising, financial power still heavily influences voter turnout, candidate visibility, and campaign framing. November will test these competing theories of power. Is enormous political spending losing its power to decide elections? November's vote will do more than choose a senator. It will redraw the map of political power. If grassroots organization can systematically defeat unlimited spending, the rules of American democracy are being rewritten. Subscribe now to follow this unfolding political realignment.